Well, Arthur, thank you so much for helping with my project. I was wondering if maybe you could say a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm. My name is Arthur. I live in Paris, in France. I'm 35 years old. Always been interested in space, but eventually I became a lawyer, which does not seem to make sense at first glance, but actually it is. There are many issues around legal stuff about the moon and beyond. And I'm also couldn't say an expert, but I work with a French think tank, and for them I do some analysis on space and what's going on in space around the world. So I'm a big fan, and I stumbled on your project online, and I thought it was really a cool project. So I tried my luck, and here we are.
I really appreciate it. I need to find about 1,500 plus more people like you.
You'll find them. I'm not too worried.
But I also have a North Houston Space Society chapter that we meet monthly, and we had a space lawyer come and talk to us, about kind of space-related issues. I think at the International Astronautical Congress, they have like some mock trial competitions around space-related issues.
Yeah.
Are you involved in that as well?
I'm not. I'm following what they do, but I'm not involved personally. I would love to do it. I would love to go to the Congress where but there's one in Paris. I think in 1 or 2 years. Hopefully, we can gather, in person. And I would love to do that if I have a chance.
Now, what kind of issues does your think tank think through?
I did a couple of reports. The first one was really about where Europe currently stands, and at the time, Europe kind of thought that we were on top of everything, and we had it figured out, and we said, we can see the US coming back very strongly in the field of launchers, bringing some new projects for going back to the moon, and we were seeing at the same time China also now having very ambitious projects, and so we wanted to say to Europe and people who are doing some stuff in space in Europe, we should be more proactive in investing in space. So that was the first report, and we did the second one more recently, and that was focused more specifically on the issue of internet constellations, because it's not only about providing broadband to everybody. The fact that we're going to have thousands of satellites in space that it's going to have some impact and in the legal field, but also in other fields. So yeah, we focused on these kind of issues.
Yeah, at dusk, I like to go outside and look at the satellites because, that's the best time to see them whenever the sun's setting and, it's at the right angle to reflecting the light down at the sky. And there are some bright satellites up there. And, based upon like my phone app, most of them have been up there for a long time. And,
Mhm.
I know SpaceX is doing like thousands or maybe even tens of thousands of satellites,
Mhm.
but they're the only company that I've heard about actually trying to redesign their satellites to not be obtrusive to the astronomer. And I haven't
Mhm.
heard the same thing from other satellite operators. It's like they've gotten a free pass. I was wondering what you thought.
Well, no, well, it's not the same issue if you have like 1 or 5 or 10 or even 30 satellites that in certain circumstances can be shiny from the ground or be a problem for astronomers. It's a very different problem if you start having hundreds or thousands of satellites. And we've seen some pictures taken by astronomers, and they show that with the SpaceX satellites, when they've just been launched and they haven't yet reached their final orbital position, they call them the trains, because you can see all these bright dots and everything. But I know that SpaceX is taking some steps to mitigate this kind of secondary effects of their constellation. I'm sure they'll find a solution. I don't think that Elon Musk is a guy that would be happy if what he's doing is resulting in less science or more complexity for science. So I'm not too worried.
It is kind of interesting to think about how one of our planet detection techniques is to observe a star for long periods of time and looking at the star dimming, periodically. And then to think that even if SpaceX made their um, satellites completely um, non-reflective and non-obtrusive, that you would still be affecting that type of astronomy.
That's the risk.
Yeah.
Uh, But then they're saying, well, talking about the moon, they're saying, anyway, land-based telescopes, still, it's such a bad idea. Let's just take the telescope on the far side of the moon. It's going to be much better for observation. So, uh, that's a way of seeing it. Maybe it's gonna happen.
Now, you mentioned that you were interested in space since you were a child.
Yeah.
Do you remember what kind of sparked your interest?
Yeah, well, my parents often tell me that one of the first words that I've been able to say, the first one, well, one of the very first one was a lamp. I was showing the moon with my finger. I was pointing at the moon and I would say lamp. That was something I was so I guess, but I don't remember. Obviously, I was too small. The second connection I had with space was actually, it took more time. My uncle took me to the Salon du Bourget. It's a little bit like the Farnborough air show, but it's the equivalent in Paris. It takes place every 2 years, and I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I was really blown away by these big planes and the jets doing the demonstrations with all the noise and stuff. So I came back I became back a big fan of airplanes. And then after doing some simulation on flight simulator for a long time, then you go up to like 10Ks in altitude, and then you realize that there is something higher than 10K. And then progressively I became interested in space. It took me some time, and then I said, there's the, I don't know, the space station, then there's the moon, then there are planets, and then you end up looking at videos on YouTube about the far side of the universe, or whatever. So it was a progressive interest, I would say, rather than just you know uh, an instantaneous passion for it.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting about your perspective and what have you. Kind of like on sort of a random side note, my wife and I were watching a show yesterday about Antarctica. And
Hmm.
it's really interesting in the summer, the sun just sort of goes around in a circle on the horizon, never ever goes across. And, I just wonder how many people, having seen a day in like Antarctica in the summer and then kind of move up a few tens of degrees in latitude and seeing it kind of go a little bit as an arc and then further up, and, kind of what kind of impact this would have on their realization that yes, Earth is really just a ball spinning and orbiting in the solar system.
It takes a little bit of imagination to understand that we are a ball in a solar system where all the planets are balls themselves. When you're looking at, for example, right now, when you look at the sky at night, in the northern hemisphere, it's pretty easy to spot Jupiter, and you can actually see Saturn, which is not very far on the left. And then sometimes you have the moon around, and you have to think, but it takes some imagination. You have to think that all of this is not 2D, it's actually 3D. But it's hard to, it's not, it takes a little bit of effort to actually understand that it's 3D. It's like the moon. When you look at the moon and the moon, there is a crescent of the moon, for example. You have to think, okay, that we're only seeing this aspect of the moon because the sun is actually over there below the earth. But you have to think about it kind of deeply, actually, before you actually start realizing that it's true, that it's like a 3D thing where we're just on the surface of a ball that's moving very quickly. But it's not natural, I guess, for us humans to think of the sky like that. At least it's not natural to me.
Yeah, and then to even go out further and kind of imagine where each of the closest stars are in relation to us, and then how all that's moving in relation to each other, and then even further out, it's just it really feels mind blowing at times.
Completely mind blowing. Yeah.
And to think that we're so concerned over, you know, the price of bread and a little place on Earth, and there we got so much to explore.
Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, what's happening on the surface of Europa at this very moment has absolutely zero impact on your life. But the price of bread, you know, has a very direct, you know. So, I mean, it makes sense, you know, that we're more concerned about what's happening on Earth because that's what's impacting us right now. But I agree with you that we should not forget of all that is, you know, out there and that we know nothing about, for sure, because it holds the keys to a very important question, but maybe a more philosophical question. But not only I mean, yeah, you know, the example is getting to know how to handle the risk of asteroids and stuff like that. That's very concrete. Although the probability of having an issue is pretty small, but anyway.
And then even smaller than that, the probability of actually being able to do something productive in response to knowing about the risk.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know if you've read a book that's called Seven Eves.
Seven Eves.
Yeah, it's a very good book. It's a science fiction book. The story is it's very easy to summarize. It's in a not distant future, and suddenly like a guy is looking at the moon, and then there's some kind of a impact on the moon, and then the moon instantly is broken into 6 or 7 pieces, and you can see
Wow.
that. And they understand it's some kind of a black hole that just went through the moon and just broke the moon into several pieces. At first, it's just like something pretty beautiful and amazing to look at, but then they do the calculation and they understand that the pieces of the moon are going to actually break into even smaller pieces because of your impacts and the force of gravity, that eventually this is going to transform into a huge meteor shower that's going to make life impossible on the surface of Earth for hundreds of years. And so they have to escape to space immediately with the technology of the not too distant future. So basically they have like a bigger ISS than today, and maybe reusable rockets, but then that's it. They have like a few months to try and get as much as possible up there. It's a great science fiction novel if you want to read it.
Who is it by?
It's a guy called, I can check it out on the internet. It's pretty easy. He's the guy who's a close friend to Jeff Bezos, actually.
Close friend to Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody in that category. So.
No, well, you know, Bezos, at least in France, I still find it hard to convince people that Bezos, they don't understand that he's very, very interested in space stuff. You know, they don't understand it. And so the guy is called Neil Stephenson, Stephenson, Neil Stephenson.
I've heard of him.
Mm.
Okay, I will check out that book. I was just looking for a good science fiction book to read, and so I appreciate the tip.
You should check it out. Yeah.
So now, yeah, you're right. A lot of people I talk to, they're surprised to find out that Jeff Bezos has a space company that has actually been around slightly longer than SpaceX. That
Mm-hmm.
he has like this. He even has said that he feels like he'll be remembered more for what he did with Blue Origin than Amazon, and that he feels like his Blue Origin work is actually more important than his Amazon work.
But it's gonna have to deliver, you know, a bit more on the Blue Origin front then.
Oh yes, yes. I mean, they're hiring like crazy. One of the people in our North Houston Space Society chapter got a job over at Blue Origin, and you know their job listings are like huge, and they have lots of facilities around. I mean, you go to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where they, you know, have like the space shuttle and everything else, and right outside of are these two huge Blue Origin buildings. Like as you drive up, they're just the first things you see.
Yeah,
Uh,
but that's why I mean I think we're all waiting. We want to see some. We want to see some new Shepard in the air. We want to see some new Glenn on the launch pad, right? I think everybody's expecting that because you know the guys at SpaceX, they're moving so fast. I mean, it's hard to even follow on a day-to-day basis what's happening in Texas with the Starship and everything. So I mean, in a way, we want to see more competition.
yeah, indeed. I think the whole idea of smooth. Let's see. What is it? He likes to say, um, "Slow is smooth and smooth is fast." I think there's still too much focus on that slow is smooth part. I'm just waiting for the smooth is fast part. Please get us there.
I mean, I think there's distinction to me, mate. I think, for example, for flying people on New Shepard, when you think about flying people on a rocket, I mean, it's perfectly okay to be super, careful. And if there is any doubt with your design or stuff like that, you should, of course, take any extra precaution you want to take. But other than that, if you have a lot of resources, if it's about taking risks with the hardware, maybe blowing up, some rockets. I mean, who cares? If you have the money, if it can help you progress faster, I think you should take that risk. And that's a criticism I can make in the European context, where building rockets is so much about political compromise between the various countries in Europe and stuff like that. So all the budgets, it's very political. And if you take extra risks and you blow up a rocket, it's a catastrophe. But because you're so careful and you take so much time to develop the product and everything, at the end of the day, you have an issue with keeping up with the competition, and to be honest, it's much less fun to follow, because we all like seeing rockets blowing up as long as there is nobody on board.
And even with SpaceX, with their multiple kind of Starship failures, I think one good outcome that's coming out of that is their training workforce. I mean, they've taken regular everyday, not everyday, but people from other industries who
Mm.
haven't worked in aerospace before, and they're actually creating rocket tanks and mounting engines to them and moving them to the launch pad and testing it out. And
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of training and kind of like skill development and system testing that has to be done too, and it's hard to get right the first time.
Oh yeah, but it seems to be very efficient because it helps them, progressing really fast. I mean, as far as I can see.
Now, if you look out at the history of humanity in like 500 years, do you think humanity is still sort of on the Earth, just making sort of like these little day and weekend trips to places? Or do you think fundamentally humanity has figured out how to survive out in space and actually advance beyond the Earth? I mean, kind of, what are your thoughts?
In 500 years?
Hmm.
Mm. Well, I think we need to do a little bit of a definition first, because if it's living off planet Earth, is it like having outposts on the moon, for example, or is having an autonomous human civilization on other bodies? Does it
How,
need a
how about people who have lived their entire life without ever
Okay.
going to Earth?
All right. So it's a little bit like The Expanse, the TV show.
I mean,
That
that's what
can.
I envision. That's my hope and prayer.
All right. Well, okay. If that's the definition, then if we go back to, okay, a good anticipation is going on a linear basis. So if we were like a step zero of space flight in 1957, 50 years later, we've done some progress for sure. And see, if you give me 500 years, that's 10 times this linear progress. Well, it seems like feasible to me. But at the same time, it's the linear hypothesis is not really necessarily the most relevant one, because we've seen that, for example, we've done like progress like crazy for 20 years between 57 and let's say 77, and then not much has happened really in terms of breakthrough, right? We were still doing the same satellites, we were still doing the same kinds of rockets, meaning we didn't have reusable rockets for the next 50 years almost, or 40 years. And then it's accelerating again now. And maybe it's going to accelerate in a way that's going to be non-linear, going back to the kind of pace that we were seeing back in the 60s and 70s. And if it goes this way, if Musk survives and still gets some money, and we don't mess it up on a global scale, yeah, I mean, 500 years, and that's very possible. But I'm asking you a question: is, do you really think that people are going to be willing to live their entire life in the asteroid belt? It's not. Is it a very nice way to live your life, or will people even have a choice actually in that? I don't know.
So, that's a very good question. I cannot imagine from a physical perspective any place in the solar system being even remotely close to the Earth in terms of comfort
Right.
and willingness. But also I earlier this year I went to go visit Scotland, and along the way I read part of a biography about Andrew Carnegie, the great steel magnate who
Mhm.
had become really wealthy here. And um, the book, the biography pointed out that they didn't come to the U.S., they didn't come to America because of better opportunities. They came to America because um, there was no opportunity for them in Scotland. The father had invested and loaned borrowed a whole bunch of money to buy some manual looms, and then the automated loom comes along and he's way in debt and can't produce the same, and they're like financially ruined. So that's why they came to the U.S. And I think the reason people would move out, and I think that's true with a lot of Europe. I mean, the reason they came to the New World was because the Old World was just basically intolerable to a certain extent to them. A lot of the waves of people. And unfortunately, I think that may be the big driver for us to send people into space is that people make the assessment that sure, it's less physically comfortable. You have all these natural risks, but then on the other hand of that, they're like, you know, um, these natural risks are kind of predictable, um, you know, quantities that we could counteract and kind of control. But the issues with like, you know, tourism, disease around the world, world conflict, these are things that could be extremely devastating that are kind of outside of our control. So I
Mm,
could see some people going and saying, space is going to be harder, it's going to be worse, but we can control our destiny a little bit better,
mm,
and
mm.
making that kind of trade-off. I don't think they go because they say, oh, space is better than the Earth. I think they go because they really want to control their life. And you see some like intentional communities, groups of people that come together and have very different ways of living, maybe eco-friendly, maybe a lot more emphasis on self-sustainability, maybe religious communities or different philosophical communities who really want to take that next step of kind of independence, of saying, we'll always have the outside world intruding on us. And those people might um, be like, I mean, there's also this concept, comfort kills. Yeah, the more comfortable you are, the less you need to push yourself, the less strength you have, and that eventually you just go away. You won't have that problem in space.
But a difference between, for example, a religious community or people who wanna, be more environment friendly, and is they basically they will tend to live a simpler life where that's not very capital intensive. Well, you're going to be actually lowering the level of your needs and the consumption, etc. Whereas in space, everything is super capital intensive. If you want to do anything in space, you need a huge amount of not only money but like just of equipment and material and actually robots. And if you want to do anything in space, you need all of that. So it's not going to be that easy. It cannot be just an individual decision, or it has to be large companies, hiring. That's maybe more possible, but then you're not going to be free. You're going to be like an exploited employee for a space colony that's paying you a very bad salary to breathe bad air, and that's like kind of the hellish scenario. Maybe I don't know.
I can see that happening though. You talk about the ultimate captive market. You're like, just try to go buy something from someplace else. It'll take you like 5 years to get it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Mm.
But
But no, but going back to your question, yeah, 500 years, there's really a good chance. Yeah.
I think there's like this key technology we have to develop first, and that's the ability to do remote automated mining and
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing. I mean, at some point, I think getting a probe on the moon will be a matter of sending the plans on how to build it to the moon, and that digital transfer would be almost free. And then it actually gets manufactured and built on site. And
Mhm.
once you start creating devices that are able then to create other devices, you kick
That's
off
it.
this chain reaction.
No, but you said that's the key concept that you just, I think, mentioned is we have to be able to build robots that build robots
From raw material found out in the
from,
environment.
yeah, that's one big challenge, and you need a lot of artificial intelligence that you need to keep under control to do it for you. That's a big challenge as well.
Yes.
And then by the time you do that, you can ask yourself the question: do I still need humans there in any way or form? Or
That's well, I mean, you could ask that on Earth too. Do we need? I mean, the majority of the population is able to stay at home, not at work, and the world still goes on. Um,
mm,
that's
that's
kind of,
true.
and you know, it's so. I mean, I think humanity decides it needs itself. It's like it's a it's a value judgment. You know, it's a choice. It's an artistic thing, maybe.
No, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the strengths that are pushing in favor of going beyond Earth and going to other worlds is very strong. You always have people like Elon Musk, appearing and trying to push. As long as society allows for these kind of individuals to do what they want to do, you have counter examples in history. You have, for example, in China, back in the during the Ming Dynasty, they initially built huge fleets of boats that were like 300 feet long, and they went all the way to Kenya and across the Indian Ocean and stuff like that. And then, for like mainly political reasons, they decided that this was useless, and they destroyed the fleets and they closed the country to foreign influence for 400 years. So you're never sure that this kind of push is going to continue into the future, which is the reason why when that push exists, you should exploit it to the maximum, because you never know how long it's going to last.
Absolutely. Now,
Mm.
if it was safe and affordable, would you go into space yourself?
Well, the kind of problem is I'm kind of afraid of heights. I'm I'm uh, I'm I'm working on it. I'm pushing myself, higher and higher. But going to space, that would be that would be a good personal challenge. But I would like to go. Would I be able to do it? Uh, I'm not sure yet, but I would like to do it.
But are you afraid of flying?
No.
Yeah,
Well, no. I, no, I'm okay. I like it now. It took. I was not afraid of flying. Afraid of flying. Then I specialized myself into air crashes. I think I read all the books, and I was aware of the thousand ways a plane can go down, and that kind of made me afraid of flying. But then I realized, this. I kind of mentalized the thing, realizing it was so safe actually, that now it's okay.
did you go through this period of where you're like boarding the flight? You're like, I really want to talk to the pilot. Is he alert? Does he is he okay? You know.
Yeah, we always listen to the voice of the of the pilot at the beginning. Sometimes it tells you a lot about. It gives you an impression of who's flying the plane, in terms of, I don't know, character or being awake or whatever.
You never really see the pilot. I just see the day whenever these airlines find like the ultimate soothing voice and they just
Mm.
have a recording, so it's no longer able to judge, but everybody's nice and relaxed.
Or you won't even get a voice at all because you have no pilot, which is actually, I think, going to be the case in not such a long future.
Um, so I'm actually extremely scared of heights too. You put me on the top of a building that's like 4 or 5 stories tall. I can't go towards the edge, but
Mm.
I have no trouble flying like a single engine small plane. With like only 2 seats. For some reason, being inside of a contained space makes me
Mm.
feel okay. Um,
No,
um,
I mean, that feeling, and that's I can maybe give a potential explanation, is that when you're in that plane, you have no choice. You mean you have no choice. You're in that plane. You're not on the edge of the building trying to figure out whether or not you want to jump. You're in the plane and you have some control on the plane. You're flying the thing. It's a really different situation. I think.
Yeah, and that's true in a car too. I always feel better in the driver's seat than in the passenger seat.
But if you go to space, I mean, you don't have the ability to say, okay, I want to land and get out of this thing like now. If even being in low Earth orbit, it can take several hours before you can actually go back. And I mean, if you go to the moon or beyond, I mean, being in a spaceship that's just done the like trans-Mars injection, pushing the engine, pushing for like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and then you know that you're gone. You don't have the fuel to turn back. You have to go. You're on the way to Mars. I mean, there's no way you can turn back. In any, it's not possible. Then the feeling that you have once that happens, I think you're gonna need people that have a very strong character. Because even the moon, when they do that, they do it in such a way that you're going around the moon and coming back if there is an issue with the engine. That's the
Mm.
safe way. You can't do that with Mars. So that particular scenario of being in the spacecraft, I think it must be, wow.
I know. So, do you remember how you found out that NASA is planning to return people to the moon in 2024?
Yeah, I think I was following that pretty closely because we had like I think some hints in the press, and then I think we had the information that I think it was Mike Pence, the vice president, was going to announce it. Then I think I saw the speech that he made before the National Space Council. But I'm not the regular guy you would ask in France. They wouldn't know. That's because I'm following this very closely. But I remember.
Most of the people I talk to have no clue that we're planning to go back to the moon. In fact, a lot of them are like, didn't you shut it down back whenever the shuttle then? And then some other people are like, haven't you always been going to the moon? So
Incredible. Yeah.
yeah, the idea of idea of having this International Space Station that's just like an orbit around the Earth, is very hard to conceptualize from everyday experiences.
Mm.
And the fact that you would go there and actually do something useful. And the gravity thing is always a thing. I really wish we get rid of this concept of zero G or microgravity, because
Mm.
everybody thinks that for some reason, whenever you go outside the Earth's atmosphere, there's like no gravity. So it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. Oh, sorry. There's someone trying to call me. I'll just.
mm,
Sorry for that. I'm not very good with Zoom.
no worries. And I see we're kind of past the time. I mean, I didn't know how much time you had. Actually, I don't want to
Yeah,
interfere.
I have like 5 minutes for sure. Yeah, with pleasure. I mean, I could talk for 2 hours, about this, of course. But no, I was about to say something. Yeah, so you said, yeah, the ISS difficult to understand. And going back, do you see some support in the US for going back to the moon? I mean, from the general population?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to say. The problem that you have is a lot of people don't have really firm views on things.
Mm.
And so whenever you talk to somebody that's enthusiastic about something you don't have firm views are, your tendency is, to be maybe accepting or more positive. But then somebody else has firm views the other way, they would probably be against it immediately, right? But the majority of people I've talked to didn't know about it. When they find out about it, they think it's cool and we should do it and it's worthwhile. In fact, one person said, the government wastes money on so many things. At least this would be wasting money on something that's inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example. Yeah, good reasoning. I like it.
There are some people, I mean, you always hear the opportunity cost, like why are we going to the moon when there's a famine in Yemen or something like that? But one surprising thing that I've heard for not going to the moon is we messed up the Earth. Why would we go mess up the moon too? which really kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah, but then you could say, okay, let's all commit mass suicide, and the Earth will be better off. I mean, the humans are a mess. I mean, for sure, and we tend to screw some of the things we do or mess it up. But I don't know. Maybe one day we'll save the Earth from extinction because we do something cool for it. And I think we're a good investment for the Earth at the end of the day.
Well, and just think about this picture right here. This is the 1968 Apollo 8, moonrise picture, and some people credit this picture as really being like the inspiration, or at least some way of demonstrating the need to take environmentalism seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're on the Earth, it feels so huge and indestructible. But whenever you see it like this, you're like, hmm, maybe not.
No, but I think this is a very good argument. I've heard it. I don't remember where I've heard it, but it's a great argument. Whenever when somebody said, was it, maybe it was Al Gore in a documentary on climate change that he did back in 2006. I think he said that when we went out to the moon, we actually discovered ourselves. In a way, that's what we discovered. We discovered the Earth. We thought we were going to explore the moon, and we actually discovered the Earth. That's a good. That's a good summary.
Absolutely. And, I mean, I think that's going to be the biggest import from space exploration is perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be some type of mineral wealth or something else. It's going to be this thought. Well, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Well, no, I want to know what's next for you and where you want to take that project. Going forward. I guess 2024 that's the target. But what else?
Yeah, for me, I'm just planning to do these daily interviews to the end of 2024. Doug Laverio, I have to say that he was part of my inspiration of his little lapel pin counting down to the end of 2024 and doing his daily hero of the day. I was
Mm,
like, in December, I was like thinking, well, what do the average people think? And I work from home, so I started as a anti-social distancing project because I was planning to do them all at the coffee shops and everything.
yeah.
So in terms of this project, my plan is to see it all the way through to the end of 24, regardless of what happens. Um, and maybe let it sit for a while and then come back and rewatch them all and come up. But kind of like what I envision is you could imagine like a high schooler on the moon, like 100 years from now, having to do a research paper of what were people thinking before the new space age started, and then
Mm-hmm.
coming across these videos and using them in her paper as kind of how I envision it.
Yeah, you got to find a way to make this a time capsule. Maybe you want to put it on a hard drive and you want to fly it to the moon and place it somewhere in a mountain on the Frau Mauro Mountains or somewhere. I don't know. And I don't know. You could do that.
Well, DHL is doing this thing with Astrobotic, which is sending a probe to the moon next year, where you can send what's called a DHL moon box. And
Hmm.
actually, for 450 US dollars, you can send something about the size of a coin. So, you get
Really?
a micro SD card, put all the interviews I've done so far, send them up there. The thing is, I just don't know how that would survive with the thermal and radiation environment. So
I agree. It's more of a symbolic thing. It's not going to survive, in the environment of the moon, possibly. But
what I need to do is find some way to do like micro etching, or so it needs to be something physical. It can't be.
you want to do like the probe, like the Voyager probe with
Yeah.
the recording, the golden record.
And there's this mathematician Gödel who talked about a way of encoding things using prime numbers and powers and the multiples. And you could create extremely large numbers, but actually write them down using very few characters by using exponents and factorials and subtraction, what have you. So
Mm.
you could take like theoretically an entire library and get it down to like 10 characters. uh,
That would be cool.
Of course, the problem is it take you like 100 years to decode it, but
That's okay. They'll have time in the future. They have a lot of time in front of them. No problem.
they'll have better computers too. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. And I know how will you provide send like maybe updates, once in a while by email or something like that, so we can
yeah,
follow.
I was thinking about setting up an email list. If I do that, would you be interested in being on it?
Pleasure, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, for sure.
I'll go ahead and set that up, and you'll be the first person.
Yeah. Okay, well, great idea. Well, keep in touch and let's see what happens.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.